Marcus Carter had lived in Maplewood Estates for nearly 4 years, but it never truly felt like home. At 16 years old, he was one of the few black teenagers in the gated community, a neighborhood filled with pristine lawns, luxury cars, and an unspoken rule that people like him didn't belong. His father, Jonathan Carter, had worked hard to get them there. As the district attorney, Jonathan had made a name for himself by fighting for justice, but at home, he preferred to keep a low profile. He knew the type of people who lived in their neighborhood, the kind who smiled in your face but whispered behind your back. For Marcus, none of that mattered much. He focused on school, basketball practice, and his love for music. With his headphones on, he drowned out the world around him, just like he was doing now, walking home from school. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the neatly paved sidewalks as he moved at his usual pace, hoodie up, backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't notice the way curtains twitched in the windows. He didn't see Mr. Peterson, the head of the HOA, standing on his porch, watching him with narrowed eyes. Marcus was just a kid walking home, but to Peterson, he was a stranger. A threat, an outsider who didn't belong. As Marcus passed by, completely unaware, Peterson reached for his phone and dialed. "Yeah, we've got a suspicious individual walking through the neighborhood. Looks like he doesn't belong here." The storm was coming. Marcus just didn't know it yet. Marcus was halfway home when he heard the sharp honk of a golf cart behind him. He pulled down one side of his headphones, turning slightly as the cart rolled up beside him, tires crunching against the pavement. Two men in security uniforms sat inside, their expressions tense. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a name tag that read Collins, stepped out, blocking Marcus's path. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Collins asked, arms crossed. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Walking home?" The second guard, a shorter man with a sharp face, scoffed. "Funny, never seen you here before." Marcus frowned. "I live here." He pointed down the street, just a couple of houses that way. Collins shook his head. "Nice try. You don't belong here, kid." Marcus exhaled, already feeling frustration build. "I literally just told you I live here. My name is Marcus Carter. My dad's Jonathan Carter." The second guard exchanged a look with Collins. "And I'm the President of the United States." He smirked. "Try again." Marcus pulled out his wallet, flipping it open to show his ID. "See? Address and everything." Collins snatched the ID and inspected it before letting out a dry chuckle. "Fake." Marcus's jaw clenched. "It's not fake." Collins held the ID up. "This says you live in Maplewood Estates. You expect me to believe that?" Marcus was used to this. The doubt, the suspicion, the way people looked at him like he didn't belong. But this time it was worse. They weren't just questioning him. They were treating him like a criminal. The second guard pulled out a radio. "We got a trespasser on Oak Ridge Lane. Call the cops." Marcus's stomach tightened. "You're calling the police? For what? Walking home?" Collins stepped forward, his posture rigid. "You're being uncooperative. So yeah, we're calling the police." Marcus felt his heart start to race, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew how these things could go. One wrong move, one wrong word, and things could get dangerous fast. As the security guard spoke into the radio, Marcus clenched his fists. He had done nothing wrong. But in this neighborhood, that didn't matter. Marcus stood frozen as the red and blue lights flashed against the clean white fences of Maplewood Estates. The sound of screeching tires filled the quiet street, followed by the slam of car doors. Two officers stepped out. Officer Bradley, a burly man with a hardened expression, and Officer Mills, a younger cop who seemed more interested in following orders than asking questions. Collins, the HOA security guard, immediately stepped forward, putting on his best concerned citizen act. "Glad you're here, officers. We've got a suspicious individual refusing to identify himself. Pretty sure he's trespassing." Marcus's stomach dropped. Bradley's eyes narrowed as he took one look at Marcus, his dark skin, hoodie, and backpack, and made up his mind. "Hands where we can see them." Marcus lifted his hands, trying to keep his voice calm but firm. "I live here. This is my neighborhood." Mills let out a mocking scoff. Yeah, and I'm the mayor. Check my ID, it's in his hand. Marcus gestured toward Collins, who still held his wallet. Bradley grabbed the ID and gave it a quick glance before tossing it back at Marcus like it meant nothing. Nice try. Turn around. Marcus's pulse pounded in his ears. What? Are you serious? You heard him, Mills said, already reaching for his handcuffs. A few neighbors peeked out from their porches and windows. Some looked concerned, but no one spoke up. Others, like Mr. Peterson, the HOA board member who had started it all, stood with arms crossed, smug smiles on their faces. Marcus wanted to fight back, to yell, to resist, but he knew better. His father had taught him how to survive these moments. Don't argue, don't resist, don't give them an excuse. Taking a shaky breath, Marcus slowly turned around. The cold metal of the handcuffs snapped around his wrist, tight and unforgiving. You're making a mistake, he said through gritted teeth. I didn't do anything wrong. Bradley shoved him forward toward the police car. Yeah, well, tell it to the judge. As they pushed him into the back seat, Marcus caught one last look at Mr. Peterson's satisfied smirk. His face burned with anger, humiliation, and powerlessness. This wasn't about rules or laws. This was about who they thought he was. Marcus sat on the cold metal bench inside the holding cell, his hands still sore from the tight handcuffs. The police station smelled of stale coffee and sweat, and the dim flickering lights made everything feel even more suffocating. His heart pounded as he picked up the jail phone, dialing the one number he knew by heart. The line rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. Dad, it's me. A brief silence. Then the calm but deadly serious voice of Jonathan Carter came through. Where are you? Police station. They arrested me for... Marcus's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to sound stronger than he felt. For walking home. Another silence, but this time Marcus could feel the fury brewing on the other end of the line. I'm on my way. Click. 15 minutes later, the glass doors of the precinct slammed open. Jonathan Carter walked in, 6'2", sharply dressed in a tailored navy suit, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with quiet rage. Every officer in the room felt the shift in the air. He marched straight to the front desk, his voice cold and firm. I need to speak to whoever is responsible for the wrongful arrest of my son, now. Officer Bradley, the same cop who had arrested Marcus, exchanged an uneasy glance with his partner. Mills tried to act casual, leaning against the desk. Sir, this is just a misunderstanding, Mills said with a forced chuckle. No need to get upset. Jonathan's jaw clenched. A misunderstanding? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his emails. Because I have footage of my son being harassed by HOA security, accused without evidence, and arrested for simply existing in his own neighborhood. Bradley shifted uncomfortably. Look, Mr. Carter, these things happen. Jonathan's eyes snapped to him like a blade. These things happen? He let out a dry, humorless laugh. I assume you've already filed the paperwork, correct? If you formally charge my son with a crime, I'd love to see what law he broke. Bradley's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Jonathan took a step forward, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. And if you haven't filed charges, then congratulations. You just illegally detained a minor. That's a civil rights violation. Mills gulped. Sir, there's no need to escalate. Jonathan cut him off, pulling out his wallet and flipping it open. The gold badge inside gleamed under the fluorescent lights. District Attorney Jonathan Carter. Silence. The entire room froze. Bradley's face turned ashen white. A younger officer in the background visibly tensed, his fingers twitching near his belt as if considering running out of the room. Even the station's captain, who had been watching from his office, stepped forward nervously. No. Jonathan looked at them all, slowly, deliberately, letting them sit in the weight of their mistake. Now, would you like to explain why my son is in a holding cell? The next evening, the HOA meeting hall buzzed with murmurs as neighbors shuffled in. Some were there for the usual discussions, parking complaints, noise ordinances, but most were there because of what happened to Marcus. Jonathan Carter walked in with purpose, Marcus beside him. His son held his head high, but Jonathan could see the tension in his shoulders. The teen had been humiliated, arrested for nothing, and tonight Jonathan would make sure everyone knew it. At the front of the room, Mr. Peterson, the HOA board member who had called security on Marcus, sat confidently in his chair. The other board members, mostly older, wealthy homeowners, were chatting amongst themselves, completely unbothered. Jonathan took a seat near the front. He didn't need to introduce himself. Everyone knew who he was now. The meeting started with routine matters, a discussion about a new gate code, landscaping plans, and an upcoming neighborhood event. But when the floor opened for concerns, Jonathan stood up. "I have a pressing issue to discuss." The room fell silent. Peterson gave a fake, tight-lipped smile. "Ah, Mr. Carter, I assume this is about your son's unfortunate incident." Jonathan's eyes hardened. "Unfortunate?" He crossed his arms, his voice measured but filled with power. "My son was harassed, falsely accused, and arrested for walking home." Peterson shrugged, still trying to act superior. "The HOA's job is to ensure the safety of the community. We have rules, and we enforce them equally." A few murmurs of agreement came from the board, but others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jonathan smirked, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. He held them up for everyone to see. "I took the liberty of reviewing past HOA complaints and security reports. And you know what I found?" He tossed a few pages onto the table in front of him. "A pattern." The board members exchanged nervous glances. Jonathan continued, "Over the past 3 years, your HOA security has stopped black residents and visitors 17 times more than white residents." He flipped another page. "There have been over a dozen complaints from black homeowners about being targeted for violations that white residents were ignored for." Gasps rippled through the room. "That's a lie!" Peterson snapped, his face turning red. "We treat everyone the same." Jonathan raised an eyebrow, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Would you like to hear the recording of your security guard calling my son suspicious for wearing a backpack?" The room went dead silent. A woman in the audience, Mrs. Holloway, whispered, "My nephew was stopped last summer. They asked him for proof he was visiting me. I thought it was a one-time thing." Another man, Mr. Evans, frowned. "I was fined for having my trash cans out an hour too early. But my neighbor, who's white, left his out all weekend and got nothing." More neighbors started nodding, murmuring, realizing the pattern Jonathan exposed wasn't just his family's problem. Peterson swallowed hard, his confidence crumbling. "Now wait just a minute. This is just exaggerated complaints." Jonathan took a step forward, towering over Peterson. "You called the police on my son, had him handcuffed, jailed, over nothing." His voice was calm, yet cutting like a blade. "And you think you can just brush this off?" Peterson shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the other board members, searching for support. But some of them were staring at their hands, avoiding eye contact. They knew he had messed up. Jonathan leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. "You made a mistake, Peterson, a big one. And trust me, you're going to feel the consequences." Peterson's face drained of color. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing, but not with the usual chatter about landscaping or community events. Everyone was talking about what happened at the HOA meeting. And by the afternoon, the whole city knew. Jonathan wasted no time. Within 24 hours, he filed a lawsuit against the HOA for racial discrimination. The case wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about years of injustice against black residents. Jonathan's legal team gathered witness testimonies, security footage, and a mountain of evidence that proved the HOA had consistently targeted black homeowners while ignoring white residents for the same violations. And once the lawsuit went public, so did the outrage. News vans lined the streets outside the Carter home. Reporters flooded the sidewalks, cameras rolling, microphones raised. "Mr. Carter, can you confirm that your son was arrested for simply walking home? Is the HOA guilty of racial profiling?" Do you plan to press criminal charges as well? Jonathan only gave one statement. This isn't just about my son. This is about every black person who has been treated unfairly, harassed, or criminalized for simply existing. And I won't stop until justice is served. The clip went viral. Social media exploded. #justice for Marcus started trending. People from all over the country shared their own stories of HOAs and security guards profiling them for no reason. The pressure was crushing. The police department tried to downplay the situation, calling it a misunderstanding. But once the body cam footage surfaced, showing the officers handcuffing Marcus without listening to him, there was no defense left. Within a week, the officers involved were suspended without pay pending an internal investigation. Activists demanded they be fired. The mayor even held a press conference, calling for reform in police training to prevent racial profiling cases like this from happening again. The officers who once smirked and dismissed Marcus now sat in disgrace, knowing their actions had real consequences. While the police department scrambled to control the damage, Mr. Peterson was in full panic mode. He tried to deny everything, claiming the situation was blown out of proportion. He called an emergency HOA meeting, hoping to regain control. But it backfired, badly. More homeowners stepped forward, sharing their own experiences of discrimination under Peterson's rule. Even board members turned against him, realizing they'd rather cut him loose than sink with him. By the end of the meeting, the board had voted him out. Peterson's reputation was ruined, and he knew it. The same neighbors he once controlled now avoided him, whispering about him behind his back. He had lost everything. Through it all, Marcus watched his father fight, not with fists, but with power, intelligence, and the law. For the first time since the arrest, Marcus didn't feel like a helpless victim anymore. He felt strong. At school, kids who barely spoke to him before approached him with respect. His teachers praised him for how he handled himself. Even people he had never met sent messages of support. This experience had changed him. He wasn't just some black kid walking home anymore. He was someone who stood for something. And from that day forward, he vowed to never let anyone make him feel small again. The courtroom was packed, journalists, activists, and community members waiting for the verdict. Jonathan Carter sat calmly beside Marcus, but everyone could see the fire in his eyes. The judge read out the ruling. The HOA was guilty of racial discrimination. The board was ordered to pay heavy fines, overhaul its policies, and implement mandatory anti-bias training. It was a massive victory, but the consequences didn't stop there. The police officers who wrongfully arrested Marcus were officially fired. Others involved were forced into racial bias training. The city council passed new policies restricting how HOAs could enforce security measures, ensuring no more racial profiling would happen under the guise of safety. It was a shift that no one had expected, all because one teenager was wrongfully arrested for walking home. And at the center of it all, Peterson crumbled. After losing the lawsuit, Peterson faced immense backlash from the community. The board had already voted him out, but now he had nothing left. His name was synonymous with racism. He tried to salvage his reputation, but it was too late. Neighbors shunned him. Businesses refused to work with him. Eventually, he resigned from every community role he held. His influence was gone. And as Marcus walked through the neighborhood, Peterson wasn't the powerful man standing on porches anymore. He was just a bitter man who had lost everything. For the first time since the arrest, Marcus walked home freely. No suspicious stares, no accusing glares. Instead, neighbors nodded at him with respect. Some even greeted him, acknowledging him as part of the community. Marcus had won so much more than just a case. He had changed how people saw him. That night, Marcus and his father sat outside their home, the streetlights glowing softly. Jonathan turned to his son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Never let them decide where you belong." Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with pride. Because after everything, he finally knew the truth. He belonged anywhere he chose to be.